This episode of the Citadel Cafe is brought to you by listeners like you. Visit patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe to find out how you can become a patron and help make this show possible. This is the Citadel Cafe, episode number 379 for Thursday, October 22nd, 2020. My name is Joel Duggan, and the Citadel Cafe is where my friends and I hang out to talk about the geeky stuff we are into. Joining me this week, Brockett Vola is back. You can find him not at Brockett on all social media. It's at the Cat Volver, right? I have my notes wrong.
Correct, yes.
I think I did like an autocomplete in Google Notes, and it just kind of like filled everything.
My name's weird enough, though, that it could probably have gone. And I should have probably branded it and grabbed it early because, you know, now on Twitter, everyone's always like the real blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
So it won't be long before, you know, Brockett becomes more of a zeitgeist type of name. But yeah.
I think you could just add some credence to your name now by getting the accounts for the real Brockett Vola.
Yeah, people will be like, oh, right. Yeah, I was following the fake one for years during his younger podcasting days. But yes, at the Cat Volver.
So now this was a private message that you sent me, but this is the kind of thing I have seen on various, posts from you on social media. But you have a copy of the Daily Paintings book that I published, a book of Piper Thibodeau's art in 2017. And you sent me an image of Emerson, your daughter, reading. I mean, she's 2, but it's a picture book. So she's enjoying the book. Did you know that it was a live photo? Because when I opened it up on my phone, there was this giant cartoony gesture of Emerson with her finger above her head, and then she slams it down onto the book, pointing directly at, I think it was a pig. But it was very, very funny.
I did know it was alive. I had hoped to catch her pointing because she was pointing several times at the book, and I wanted to bring it up too because it was on you and Piper on my mind this week too. Because of that, and she found that book, and she did. She pointed at him. Oddly enough, that was not the one book. The picture in all of Piper's books thus far at my daughter really needed all of her stuffies to see, all of her stuffed animals, but she brought them all over to look at this banana slug painting, and she just kept saying banana, and she kept pointing at it and showing all of her stuffies the banana slug. So I think there are fantastic pictures throughout the whole thing, and Banana Slug's definitely very good, but in the grand scheme of that book, like, Banana Slug was not jumping off the page the way it was to my daughter. So it just shows you the wide range of interesting and creative pictures that Piper has put out, and you were able to help put out as well. And it was really cool. It's been something that I like. The other day where I was rifling through some stuff, and your Star-Crossed Volume 1 came out, and I pulled it out of where it was so I could put it out so I could see it more often, so I would know it's on the shelf, because things have been jostled over the years. With a child, you shove things in different places, then you forget about them. But it was interesting too, because I was like, with the Piper book, it's been nice to look through here and there, and for a brief period it was like out more displayed, and then my child tore parts of the dust cover, so now the dust cover is essentially in a different place. But she's really enjoyed looking at the pictures, and they're obviously very well drawn and beautiful, and I think it's fun because some of them are pop culture-y and some of them are just landscapes, and I think some of it is just really fun to see what she is drawn to, and I think that's something that's really unique and awesome about art of any kind. So
I think too,
it was really cool.
The appeal of Piper's work has a broad, you don't even have to get to joke, like, to know that it's a good, a good painting. People that don't speak English wouldn't get the puns half the time, because usually the puns are based on English words, right? So if you're if you're German, then you may not get the whole thing. But one of the things that I've noticed, and even the longevity of Piper's work, the book has been out of print for at least a year and a half now. But we still have clients that will want print orders for their shops. In particular, Halloween. There's a couple of clients in the States that have like prints that they want in their comic shops and things like that because Piper's done some the cute spooky, you know what I mean? Like it's like
Yeah.
it's Halloweeny, but it's all like chibi and very adorable and stuff. And that kind of thing is something that's big, and I forget about it because the book is no longer like sold all the time, or at all, I guess. The prints don't move as fast, so I forget sometimes that I still even have a store for Piper's work, and it's always refreshing, when people come back because they want more of the same print, and they say, "Oh, by the way, this one still sells really well." And it's like, it's funny, like as saturated as the internet is, and as popular as her work has become, there's still a lot of people out there that just have no idea that Piper's work even exists. And
Yeah.
as a publisher, like I know I got so steeped in it that I had to remind myself, like a lot of times when I, mentioned the book to people, or, you're at social, not anymore, but like when you were at social gatherings and you said stuff like that at a Christmas party, people were like, "Whoa, wait, what? Like you have a book? Like you published a book?" And so, I'd show them Piper's work and like, I've never seen this before, so it's always fun to kind of like turn people on to that kind of stuff, especially these days where Piper is still doing, I'm not sure what number she's on. She's got to be into the 3,000s now, if not 4,000s, in terms of her daily paintings. But I mean, talk about, a breath of fresh air on social media these days, just kind of have that cartoon kind of fly by,
Right.
whenever you're going through. So I always encourage people to check it out. Piper Thibodeau, well, you can go to forgepublishing.com and you'll see links to all the stuff there. But speaking of appealing, somewhat childish endeavors, I did a Lego Let's Chat on Twitch last Sunday, and the VOD is available on the videos part of the channel if anybody's interested. That's twitch.tv/Joel Duggan. And this was something that I tried to attach to a September goal, but it didn't end up going quite the way that I wanted. I wanted to try to get 100 subscribers on Twitch, which would then unlock this Lego stream. But I was so disappointed that I didn't make that goal that I was just like, well, I really want to do this Lego thing anyway. So I think what we're going to do is I'm going to move the Lego Let's Chat thing to a Patreon goal. And I'm not going to keep it behind the goal wall, but I can't do these regularly. I only have a handful of Lego sets left to build. And if I do them too often, then it'll just be like I'll run out of Lego. So what I'm going to do is put up a goal to say like, well, I'll do these whenever I can. But if we reach a certain goal on Patreon, then I'll do them monthly. And the idea was that I don't have like a Let's Chat component of my stream because I don't have a webcam. I don't stream with a face cam. And so I don't often sit there and just chat with the chat room, like a lot of our friends that do podcasts and stuff will do. And so I thought this was a really good way to not be playing a video game, still be doing something interesting that's super chill, because when I'm not paying attention, the Lego doesn't try to shoot me. And so I can sit there and engage with the chat, stop what I'm doing, talk with them, talk about the channel. And so I turned it into kind of like a town hall where we were talking about the Twitch channel, the games I'm playing, different goals, trying to figure out, what the last emote's going to be on the channel, what my plans are, like whether I'm going to do future Lego streams, like stuff like this. And so it was a really cool stream. And somebody else that was streaming Lego rated with like 50 or 60 people. And turns out a lot of them were really nerdy Lego fans. So I like Lego, but I don't know what all the pieces are called. Like I don't know all the terminology. And so we had like this like small team of experts in the chat. So like, I don't know, what is this? And someone says like, oh, that's an axle. I was like, oh, okay, good to know. I now know what an axle is. Because some of the pieces, because I was building Lego set 75246, the Death Star cannon, which was a gift from a friend of the show, Alistair McFly. And part of it has some Technic pieces. A lot of the Star Wars sets will have Technic Lego pieces in them because they have swiveling guns or moving wings or like mechanical functionality to the playset. And so I'm less familiar with the Technic stuff. I don't buy the Technic sets because I don't find I like the way that they look in the end. I much prefer things that look like, ships or vehicles or whatever.
Blocks or sure, yeah.
Yeah, or houses or things. But like the Technic stuff still looks like Technic blocks. It doesn't look like it's trying to be something else. It doesn't look like a model.
Yeah.
It looks more like an engineering kit. And
Mechanical thing. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, but it was really cool to have everybody on board. So if people that were there are now listening to this because we talked about the podcast, thanks for coming by, and I hope everybody had a good time. I like to do I like to do the knolling part of the build at the beginning of every bag. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but I basically lay out all the pieces out like in a nice orderly fashion at like right angles to one another. So, um, it adds
like
to
the picture show.
Yeah.
In the catalog. Yeah, the inventory or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So I because I really enjoy Lego, but it's also not a cheap habit. It makes a small play set of like 270 pieces last longer because it takes you a fair amount of time to lay everything out. And then when it comes time to build stuff, you're not actually hunting through a pile of pieces looking for the thing that you want. You can clearly see where it is. And I find it very relaxing. It allows me to chat with the audience and stuff like that. But we also unwrapped a couple of other Lego kits that were gifts, which was really, really nice from the community. Opened up a gift from the Cosmic family. So Cosmic Dancer, one of my moderators, Little Cosmic Boy, Little Cosmic Dancer, and Cosmic Dad or Cosmic Man. I can't remember what we call her husband. We have different names for everybody. But anyway, they sent me the Snow Speeder, the 20th anniversary edition. So these are the ones from the Battle of Hoth that Luke flies. And then my dad gave me a present, and it was a Resistance A-Wing starfighter from the latest film. This is from the Last Jedi. I think it's the Last Jedi. No, what was the Last Jedi? Was the second one? Rise of Skywalker.
Yes.
Rise of Skywalker was this one. So this is a Republic A-Wing starfighter. So it's got a green stripe on it. So, and they're really fun because these are all minifig scales. They're not the big like Ultimate Collector's Edition things. These
I
feel,
was wondering. Okay,
yeah, these feel more like they're in scale with a minifigure, which I like. I prefer those sets. I mean, well, also they're more accessible and affordable, but yeah, I really
it's beautiful.
I really enjoyed the time on stream this week. So thanks to anybody that came out. The VOD is available at twitch.tv/JoelDuggan.
This A-Wing can shoot you though, Joel. It appears.
Yes,
so
actually, and so can the Death Star cannon. As a matter of fact, there's these spring-loaded pieces that you put into the build, and it's funny. Like usually, it's like there's the part of the build that looks like the laser, and then there's a more solid part of the build that will actually shoot a long plastic red or green bolt across the room. And I mean, it will go 30 feet. Like I had to put the box on the table, and then one of them fired accidentally, and it went across the room. It took me 20 minutes to find it after the stream. I was like, where the heck did that go? And because I've got hardwood floors in the apartment, so it just went for days, right? It's like, okay. So I don't that kind of functionality doesn't really appeal to me. I do like the fact that a lot of the Star Wars vehicles they will move. So they'll have moving canopies. You can open the cockpit, put the thing in. You can sometimes the wings will change, or landing gear will come down, flaps and stuff. The A-Wing doesn't have a lot of moving parts, but the Imperial shuttle Tidarium that I have, which I did build on stream a couple of years ago, that moves as you think it would. The landing gear goes up and down, and then the two wings will fold up vertically so it can land. And then when you pick it up, if you were playing with it as a kid and you were flying it around the room, you could bring it down so it has that Y formation. The shuttles. It's very cool stuff. The thought that they put into these things. Moving on to listener email, we have an email from the 00 Squirrel. Hey Joel and co-host, this email is designed to spark discussions, but like a bit like a nerd Mount Rushmore from a while ago. If you're wondering, Tony Stark, Legolas, Darth Vader, and Frank Moses. If you could pick one book or a book series that would get turned into a movie or a Netflix series, etc., what would it be and why? Extra challenge if the co-host is Lou, no zombies. Keep up the amazing podcasts, and both of you have a great day. Stay chunky, the 00 Squirrel. The Stay Chunky sign-off is actually from the Spawn Chunks, because 00 Squirrel is also a Minecraft fan. and a
Oh,
listener of the
nice.
Spun Chunk. So
That's
a
good.
lot of our listeners on the Spun Chunks will be just like, some sort of clever Minecraft related sign out, like logging out or has left the game or stay chunky or whatever. But I
Oh,
thought it was
nice.
funny that
Thanks for pointing
it's
that
now
out.
permeating the Citadel Cafe where people are adding funny sign offs to their emails. So I totally encourage this. Please continue. It's fun. Surprisingly, this took me very little time to come up with a book that I think would make a good. I went with a movie. I'm realizing now after rereading the email that this could also be a very good series. I'm
Yeah,
not.
if you think of a series now, almost you could have a TV series that's only 3 episodes nowadays,
Yeah.
like if it's done well. So really, yeah, you could kind of take it both ways for sure.
Yeah. The issue I have with it, and one of the reasons why I think my brain did not go that way, is because I've lost a lot of faith in places like Amazon and Netflix because so many of their original series are hit and miss for me these days. I don't have as deep a faith in things like Stranger Things is good, but like not everything Netflix does is great, and so I'm a little bit on my heels on that. But I really enjoyed A Dirty Job by Christopher Moore. It's a fantasy adventure. We'll call it maybe a supernatural fantasy, I guess. But it's also very funny. It's a story about a guy named Charlie Asher, who's a pretty normal guy with a normal life, married to a bright and pretty woman who actually loves him for his normalcy. They're even able to have their first child. Yes, Charlie is doing okay until people start dropping dead around him, and everywhere he goes, a dark presence whispers to him from under the streets. Charlie Asher, it seems, has been recruited for a new position as Death. And
Yeah.
it sounds morbid, but essentially, and this is not a spoiler because it happens in the first chapter, Charlie ends up being a single dad trying to raise this toddler, his new baby, while managing being the Grim Reaper. And
Mhm.
things like walking down the street and being, now that he has these supernatural powers, he's now aware of these various forces at work that are vying for human souls. And there's like these evil creatures under the streets that he calls sewer harpies. There's I think there's like a Buddhist monk or a Buddhist temple that he's comes into contact with. And what I like so much about Moore's writing is that he takes bits and pieces from existing religious beliefs and systems, and sometimes they're tropey, sometimes they're more obscure, especially for like North American readers. And he just kind of melds them all into like, so this is what you all think from your different walks of life is normal. But then he kind of like makes this world and says, no, 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 this is how it is. These are the rules of my imaginary Charlie Asher is the Grim Reaper kind of story. And he pulls the bits that work for his story from Buddhism and Judaism and Christianity and traditional myth, even myth and mythology and stuff like that. And he
Mhm.
just kind of like piles them all onto one big pot and boils it and says, this is the story, this is the world that you live in. And so it has all these like little grounds of reality, but it's always like an interesting take. But I do remember like the balance of the mundane on the surface juxtaposed with the strange supernatural underbelly of the story is just really, really well done. Like he works in a dollar store, so the Grim Reaper is
Yeah.
basically like, a dollar store checkout clerk. Like it
Yeah.
has like it almost has like a Kevin Smith vibe to it a little bit. And it's funny because he doesn't know what's going on. He's what's called I think it's described in the book. He's like a beta male, so he's not a leader. He's not an alpha dog. Like he's just
Yeah.
like he's doing this reluctantly, and at every turn he's just like, okay, well I guess I have to do this because if not, bad things will happen. And it has this kind of like pending doom, but then he is doom. Like there's all these really interesting moments. And I think one of the reasons why I think it would make an excellent film is because we're now at a point where special effects and storytelling and all that kind of stuff, it could be done very, very well.
Yeah.
uh I don't think it could be done in a PG-13 way. I think you'd want to go, maybe not R, but you'd want to go into a bit of a horror comedy kind of vibe with it, because some of the stuff that happens is like it's death, so like it's kind of grotesque, and like there's
Yeah.
talking corpses, and like all the different kind of things, the kind of like Hellboy-esque type of stuff that you'd see.
American Werewolf in London type of
Yeah,
like,
like
yeah,
that
yeah.
kind of thing. So I think that it would be good, and I would say, given what I've seen from things like Ron Howard in the Da Vinci Code series of movies, I think Ron Howard or Jon Favreau would be excellent directors for a movie
Well,
called
one of them
Yeah,
is nearly impeccable in my opinion.
yeah,
And that's Favreau. I think he's
yeah.
been phenomenal recently. But
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, and Favreau obviously capable of doing a very good series, with the Mandalorian.
Right.
I
Right.
just don't
Both.
think that this would fit on Disney Plus. Like this is like Disney is not the mother for for
Have
this
you
particular film.
as we've been in Halloween, and I'll get to stuff I've been watching. It's painfully apparent how much Disney Plus has distanced itself from certain things that would be more less than family friendly, because their Halloween section is essentially Nightmare Before Christmas, Hocus Pocus, and then a series of Disney Channel Halloween movies like Halloween Town, and you're like, I'm pretty sure Disney and its other companies have done plenty of horror films or have fingers in it, but they're not going to put it on Disney Plus, and that's all going to be on Hulu, which they own, and Hulu is loaded with like more frightening stuff. But yeah, it's just it's the same way where you're like, Dirty John, we're going to pitch it to Hulu, and then Disney can put the money into Hulu, but they won't put
Yeah.
it on Disney Plus. So.
What's the scariest thing on Disney? Is it like Pirates of the Caribbean?
The most frightening thing I've seen is probably a few episodes here and there of different cartoons, because there's a few of them that slip through the cracks. But honestly, that I found is the Treehouse of Horrors. Since they've gotten their
Hmm.
hands on Simpsons, they have a
Right.
whole tab that's every Treehouse of Horror, and I started to watch the first couple going through, and they're not. I mean, those also aired on network TV, but The Simpsons always sort of like pushed the boundaries of what they could do, and Fox kind of let them.
Hmm.
So for Disney Plus, Simpsons Treehouse of Horrors are probably the most. Definitely for a cartoon on Disney Plus, where you assume
Edgy.
every cartoon on Disney Plus is going to be safe for kids, it's probably the edgiest thing on Disney Plus, to be honest.
I can't remember the last time that I watched an episode of The Simpsons.
I don't either. I think it was probably when they were sub 20s seasons,
Oh,
probably sub 18s or even 19,
I
like
yeah, I
something
think
in
it
the
was probably
teens.
20
So
years ago for me. I think I was probably in university. I think we
yeah,
were, because we would have all gathered around to watch it. Like on, I think it was
gathered
Sunday night,
around.
Thursday night. I don't remember when it was. Well, because not everybody had a TV. Like,
Well, no, I know, but nowadays you think about people having TVs in their hands, Joel, and
I
like
know.
when you hear Joel gathered around, people are like around a phone, around
Yeah,
a tablet. You're
no,
like, no, when people
around it,
only had one TV and cable,
and it
they
wasn't.
would,
And then the television, it was a tube. It wasn't even a flat screen. Like it was like a 24 or 27-inch square box
yeah,
that we,
yeah,
well, because I mean, this was 97, 98.
yeah,
So like,
yeah, 90s for
and
sure.
like not everybody had a TV, and if they did, they probably bought it from the university town. They didn't bring it with them. Like it's
Hmm.
they just had it
Too
there.
expensive, too heavy.
No. And the rooms weren't big enough. Like I stayed in a room that was 2 foot wider than the bed that I slept in. Like it wasn't, you didn't have any room to do anything, because
You're like
you didn't spend
on a spaceship.
no, you didn't spend any time in your actual dorm room unless you were studying. Like the only time that you did that was when you were sleeping, is because uh, people in the house that I stayed in had larger rooms at the end of the halls. So some of the big double rooms, you could easily put like a card table up in the middle of it. And so ultimately you'd end up with a friend or someone that knew the guy at the end of or girl at the end of the hall, and you would all just congregate in that room. And it was nice because you could walk down the hall, you go down, and before you went down for like dinner, you'd go and you'd gather in this room, and then all 8 of you would all go down and eat dinner together. So it was like having little sub families. It was really cool. I don't regret living on campus for 2 years. Living off campus was more of a financial decision later on, but I and I like after a while I wasn't a big partier. So being on campus after a while, you're kind of like, okay, I'm done. I need some peace and quiet. But in the first 2 years, like I made a lot of friends living on campus, which was great.
Yeah. Sounds the structure of it sounds like you're on a spacecraft. You're in
Yeah.
your little tiny pod with your one berth. I get out of my berth. I walk down the hallway. I walk to like, my cadet leaders' quarters, which is a double size room. We gather there, and then we go down for mess, and we eat our meals, and then we go back up to our pods to study our star charts.
Did you live on campus when you were at university?
It's weird. I spent 2 years at NYU, New York University, in the heart of Manhattan, and so I was definitely in dorms there. And every dorm I stayed in, my freshman dorm was a very small room with 3 of us in it, connected to another room where 2 more people were in it. But it was right on Broadway, on 10th Street and Broadway, which, if you're familiar with Manhattan, is an incredibly great piece of real estate. So the room itself wasn't fantastic, but you were right up on everybody, and that was fine. And then my second year, we had a big long room, loft style, and I had 2 other roommates. But then when I moved back to Florida and went to FSU, from the jump, I was pretty much off campus. But that is sort of more the style down there too, because in Manhattan, there's a lot of real estate for young college people to go out and find their own place to live. Whereas in Florida, it was like around the campus, and my hometown is a college state city. So basically everything around the city is built around the capital or the college. So there's plenty of housing for students there, and that's sort of more the experience there. But yeah.
Yeah, Mount A was an academy back in the early 1900s, but then it turned into a university.
You're not surprising me with the way your dorms are described.
No, well, no. My grandfather went to Mount A when he was in the 1930s, 20s. Anyway, as the campus expanded, newer buildings had newer rooms. They were much larger and more space. But I stayed in Truman, which was a traditional dorm. No longer a dorm, actually. They deemed it too small and too, like not the best social situation for people. So it's now like offices and like the gym and the meal hall and stuff. But around the town of Sackville, which was population 6,000 maybe, 10,000 when the students were in, it like almost all of the houses within a few blocks of the university were all rentals. Like they were all just meant to get 4 or 5 students together in a big Victorian house and just have each person rent a room, and there'd be a communal kitchen, bathroom, etc. And so once you move off campus, if you weren't living in one of the very few apartments that you could find, you'd be usually sharing a house with someone. And those houses were always kind of a shit show. I lucked out in my 4th year. I think the best living situation I had was probably the 4th year. I was downtown above the Home Hardware retail outlet, and which is great.
Above a hardware store?
Yeah, because it was nice because it like there was nothing going on. So in a small town, it was 9 to 5. So at 5 o'clock, the hardware store closed down.
Yeah.
And so you didn't have to worry about being loud when you were home. You weren't disturbing anybody. There was no one above us. It was only a 2-story building. I think the only issue we had was just there was a freak storm and we had a leaky roof, but that was it. Like it was, and they fixed it. It wasn't like, the guy that owned the hardware store owned the building. So it's like,
I was about to say,
if they
got a pretty good landlord.
And actually they were a really good landlord. But like, it was one of those situations where like, I would go down to do laundry at the laundromat 2 doors down and leave my laundry there and then go back and get it because like it was like 99, 2000 and it was such a small town that no one cared. Like it just if someone wanted to steal my laundry, all the power to you. Like
laundry was safe in the 90s, Joel. Where have we come as a world where laundry is no longer safe? The way you're describing your university experience, like with words like A Mound and used to be an academy and my grandfather and above a hardware store and Saxville or whatever, all these words, it's man, it sounds like you're pitching to me like a Hulu Stephen King or like a oh, it used to be this back in the day and now we're all young people at university and when you're off campus, 4 of you get in an old beat up Victorian house to rent, aka horror show. Like I don't understand. Like I understand that plenty of things for King and we've talked about with Lock and Key and these different shows have filmed in Nova Scotia, but in the area. But I have to say that the more you describe it, the more I'm like, I can kind of understand why what came first? The authors were inspired by the area, or the area inspired the authors? Probably more the area first, but it's
Yeah.
really interesting. Just even you talk about your life, I'm like, oh, I like these details. Yeah, put these down. You got That's very interesting. It's much more exciting than than most I think American experiences, just because with all the flatness of college towns throughout America, we have very few
Well, and
rich
they're
historical
small
areas.
cities
But
unto
yeah,
themselves, really. I mean, and you
yeah,
get
for
that in
sure.
Canada too. I mean, you go into like UFT, like University of Toronto or McGill or something like that in Montreal. Like, I mean, they're huge, huge
Yeah.
campuses. I could walk clear across my campus in 10 minutes. Like it was, and actually, and if you go for 15, there's cows. Like it was. Well, I remember when because I was training at the time, and I was doing a lot of running early morning, before classes, and I was going for a solid 4 or 5 kilometers, uh, uh, 2.5 miles for those of you that are wondering, and so I'd be running, and in order to go anywhere, I'd have to go out these long country roads, and I'd be halfway through my run. It's still kind of dusk, and you're trying to make out what's going around the corner, and then you just hear moo, and you're like, "Whoa, geez, okay, there's a cow right there." Okay, the city boy Joel is just like, "Well, in the country now."
Yeah,
It was,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, and that was the kind of thing, like, how far do I go on my run? Well, I run until the cow pastures stop, and then I have to turn around and come back. That's essentially what was
Gee.
going on. It was pretty fun, actually. I'm glad I went to a small university. Although I don't think I knew that you went to NYU. In all the years that we've talked, I don't know that I knew that about you.
Oh yeah, yeah. Go Violets, whatever their mascots are. Yeah,
So if you
it's really
had
interesting.
a book that you wanted to turn into a series, what would you want to pull the trigger on?
Oh, well, my first gut was Dresden Files, but that had a shot, bad, and also in the sort of, I think, early aughts when sort of things were just being grabbed for sci-fi and different shows. I feel like sci-fi now, or even better, something like a Hulu could do a much better Dresden Files, because again, there's more than 12 of them, and he has a pretty clear, Jim Butcher, the author, has a pretty clear through line for all of them, and you could either take one book and do a 3 to 5 episode arc season each year, and then put some solid resources in it. It's a noir mixed with supernatural and sci-fi and fantasy, because there's a solid mix, maybe less sci-fi, but a good mix of fantasy as well, because fairies and the fairy kingdom and realm are just as important to the series as like vampires and that sort of stuff. But it's really great. It's also set in Chicago. Chicago, I got the Chicago in there. I never do that. Which makes it also sort of like, I feel like whenever you have a series like that take place in a big city, it tends to be a little exciting too, because it feels a little grounded. Even if you never film in Chicago, which they probably wouldn't, but maybe they would. I don't know. Anyway, but that's good. I say was my first instinct, but I'd actually give the green light to a different series, because I don't think Dresden Files, I mean, it's great, and I think there's a solid niche for it. Whereas I don't know that as many, and I brought it up a few times. There's a series of books by Peter Clines, um, who writes these series called X Heroes, and is basically superheroes in a zombie apocalypse, or what used to be a zombie apocalypse, or I used to be sorry, as my daughter bangs stuff in the background. It used to be a world of superheroes, and then the zombie apocalypse happens. So it's not, so there was an established greater world, and then eventually zombies creep in, and some of the heroes still sort of identify as those heroes, because some of them still obviously have their powers. And it's very LA, if you live in LA, because one of the places they build their base is on the Paramount Pictures studio lot,
Oh, nice.
which they call the Mount. Lots of mounts talks today. A Mount, Paramount. Get your mount in. Um, anyway, and it's good. There's 5 books. I probably room for far more. And Peter Clines also has done some series in books in a thing he calls Threshold, which are very Lovecraftian. So Yeah, overall, Peter Clance has really shot up as one of my favorite authors, and I'd probably give that one the green light just because it's something fun. I think superheroes are still just in the general mind of the world, with the MCU still being so big, and zombies with Walking Dead sort of on its last legs, no pun intended, but still branching out a bit. Aren't completely gone, as I'm sure you'll hear all the time from zombies my podcast and Lou and everything. But I think that's a good mesh of two. I'm not a zombie fan. No offense to that. It's just they just never spoke to me. And really I'm not a vampire fan, but vampires play big into the Dresden Files and zombies play huge into X Heroes, and both series are incredibly enjoyable. So I
Nice.
recommend both, and I think both would be done really well.
Well, I know that I'm going to be tapping into my long-awaited Borderlands 3 play in the main topic for this week, but I know that you and I are probably going to be able to talk about Borderlands 3 at length. So I'm curious because it's Halloween, and I'm not a big Halloween guy. I want to start
Oh
with you
no,
because I
really?
want to know. I want to know what you're watching for Halloween stuff this season.
So October is like one of my favorite months. I tend to do hashtag candy of this day and do a different candy every day. Try and do no repeats, and I also try and really absorb some horror films. I like horror generally throughout the year, but during this period, I kind of have shelved things that would scare me, or I just try and drag a bunch of stuff off the shelf that was in my queues and I just never got around to. So um, the A-list granddaddy of the month is The Haunting of Bly Manor, which is a continuation of the Haunting anthology series from Netflix. We've talked about The Haunting of Hill House. I have at length on this show, and I think we discussed it as well. And it was my pick back in 2018 for best, my favorite TV show of that year. Hill House was, and Bly Manor, to my knowledge, at this moment, I haven't seen a bunch of the really big things that have been out, something like a Lovecraft Country, which is probably perfectly up my alley. I just don't have access to. So I haven't seen that. And of course, Mandalorian season 2 will come out at the end of this month. But for now, I think Haunted of Bly Manor is probably my pick again for 2020. If you enjoyed The Haunting of Hill House, I think you will enjoy Bly Manor, but in different ways. You should potentially prepare yourself if you wanted if you want a lot of jumps and a lot of just things that are just going to really make you creeped out and scare you, then Blind Manor is not as much that. It has a lot more thematic tension and pacing to it than really just like, oh my god, that thing just really scares the hell out of me. Like there's a lot more ominousness, there's a lot more mood used. The story itself, the book, it's based off of, because both season one was built based off of the Haunting of Hill House, and season two is based off the book The Turning of the Screw. If you're not familiar with those books, then the whole story itself is new to you. But I will say I felt like Bly Manor felt the most like it was based off a book and adapted, in my opinion, having not read the book, very well, because the pacing feels like you're sort of working your way through a book. In fact, there's a little bit of narration to it as well. Um, but some actors returned from Hill House. Not everybody. There's a lot of new actors as well. It was just very good. Very, very excellent. I had a sort of debate with my friend that comes up on the show a lot, Adam, who I share a lot of the similarities with, and he and I were discussing. I was like, I don't know where I'd put Blind Manor versus Hill House. Like my gut instinct was like Hill House was still going to be number one, but Blind Manor still got me so many times emotionally. It definitely did not frighten me nearly as much as Hill House. Not nearly as much. So I guess on the scale of scares, Blind Manor is mildly tame. But if you really love gothic horror, if you love more of an ambience, like I think when I think of Blind Manor, I think of more Hitchcockian things like Rebecca, or even it just left my brain, but like not Del Toro, God, Guillermo del Toro's Crimson Peak. More of those types of things where it's more just like that era of like an old house around a small town, and how that affects people more specifically. It's really good. I thought Bly Manor, without getting into spoilers, Hill House felt like it was like a roller coaster at times, where both emotionally and scares. It kind of went like we go down a little bit, and then boom, we hit you with something, and we go down a little bit, boom, and then we sort of work our way towards a climax. That you can argue, some people can argue that they didn't love some of the elements of the climax or the finale or denouement or whatever of Hill House. I feel like Bly Manor is just a constant, pretty steady climb. Not a lot of peaks, not a lot of valleys at all. But the climb is well done, and the peak is beautiful. I really love Bly Manor a lot. So it would be I think it would be very interesting to revisit it like I have with Hill House, years from now, and see how it holds up again. But it's quite good. Very, very good in my opinion. And on the more friendly side of things, as we talked about Disney Plus earlier, I tried to find at least one thing that if I was going to recommend Halloween stuff to a family they could watch, and the new Adams Family from 2019, um, DreamWorks picture, I watched on Hulu, and it was good. I really enjoyed it. I'm not a massive Family person, but and I'm not a massive DreamWorks person. But if you enjoy the DreamWorks aesthetic, which is essentially a lot of like I was gonna say naughty humor. It's not like bawdy humor. It's more like, a Despicable Me, where the jokes are like people get shot with like goofy guns, and
Mm.
and the minions do like little silly naughty things or whatever. Like the DreamWorks aesthetics definitely applied to the Adams Family, but the Adams Family itself sort of is the DreamWorks aesthetic, which is like jokes and sort of the slightly uh darker sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that what's good about the Adams Family film is that it very much makes an important message that you should not just be the same. Like sameness is not embracing everyone's uniqueness. And the Adams Family, being the Adams Family, is very, very unique in comparison to the world in which they live. Although you are introduced so much more to a broader sense of the family itself. But I will say the one thing is, there was a lot of times as a father of a 2-year-old and another baby on the way, part of me was like, I didn't check the rating on this, but there are times that maybe showing like 7 or 8-year-olds holding like large weapons and trying to kill each other as siblings is not the best thing to show other children,
Mm.
because as much as you might as a parent try and be like, no, it's for fun or it's a cartoon, like there's still some stuff I see my daughter do. I'm like, I don't know for sure why she would think that or say that, but
Mm-hmm.
so for me, I feel like it's perfectly fine for PG-13 and older. If it's you have much younger kids, particularly the type that might see somebody pick up a cleaver and might pick up like not a cleaver, but might pick up like a stick in the yard and start whacking their sibling a bunch with it. If that's not actually normally their shtick, then maybe Adam's Family is will have a little bit more of a mixed message. But overall, I think you know what you're gonna get with Adam's Family. They embrace the morbid. They have a lot of good little bits, and there's jokes for families. There's jokes for kids. There's jokes for adults. Like overall, I was pleased with that. I think my expectations were very low, and ended up being like a solid B sort of film. So that would probably be my recommendation there. And yeah, so I like that Bly Manor, and then I just sort of rambled through a bunch of different films in the Hulu series of Into the Dark, which is just like a year long. Like they make little films they put out for every month, usually around a holiday. So there'll be like a Valentine's Day one and this one. All of them were pretty dumb. They're simple. They're not the worst. They have some decent ideas sometimes, and they have some solid actors from different shows you've seen here and there. But overall, they're not. I didn't think any of them were particularly great. I haven't seen all of them, and there's a few of them that I sort of didn't watch as much. But the one that stands out the most is I'm effing with you, which is just a completely over the top April Fool's esque horror one. It's more like serial killer jokes and stuff like that than it is like ghosts and ghouls. But that was the only one that I really was like, okay, at least parts of this I am enjoying. Whereas the rest of it was just sort of like Into the Dark is very much like if you're familiar with Are You Afraid of the Dark as a child? And then they just gave them more R-rated adult budgets. And then you were like, oh, these are fine. And some of the ideas here are okay. But at the end of the day, I'm not really walking away from this deeply scarred or really impacted by it. But again, at this time of year, sometimes it's just fun to sort of throw in the trash candy. So those are my biggest ones. To wipe my brain of the real spookums, I've been revisiting Gravity Falls on Disney Plus, which is 2 seasons of excellent kids cartoons
I need to
that are
watch that.
excellent for adults.
I
It's so good,
Yeah,
Joel.
and
I've
I've been struggling, and unfortunately, like trying to find some things to watch and just going through the same old kind of like default searches on Prime Video and Netflix and not finding what I want and struggling to get through stuff that I'd started but I haven't finished, and I always kind of tune out after 20 minutes, like American Gods, and like I'm just trying to slog through some stuff that I've invested time in and I would like to see it finished, but I just don't find it holds my interest. And I forget. When I think Disney Plus, I think Marvel, Star Wars, and classic Disney films. I forget that they have things like Gravity Falls, and obviously, I'm looking forward to next week when The Mandalorian is going to return for season 2. But
mhm.
I don't remember what it was. Like, I think I was spending the summer on Disney Plus rewatching some more obscure Marvel movies that I had only seen once. Things like Dark World from Thor and Doctor Strange and like stuff like that. I hadn't seen that often. Captain Marvel was another one, but like I have to remember and kind of talk to some more friends that have watched things like Gravity Falls and just find out where those things are. There's another Steven Universe, I think, is another one. I don't know if that was Disney, but
That's
that's
not Disney, but it's highly, highly
also
recommended.
another good cartoon. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
and I haven't finished it. I probably won't, but I did watch and enjoyed the first 3 episodes of She-Ra on Netflix because it was different, and it was
Yeah.
and it's well done. It's a good story, like it's good message, like all that kind of stuff. So there are some good things out there. I just haven't thought. I think part of it is just like that the paralyzing choice. You've got
Yeah.
not
You have too
only
many.
not only when you're in Netflix are you doom scrolling for 20 minutes trying to figure out what to watch, but like Netflix is one of 3 services that I have access to if you don't include YouTube, and it's just like,
Mm,
for people that have more than that, it's just like, where do you even start? Um,
yeah.
to return to the Adams Family, just so people know, the official rating is PG on the Adams Family, but you were suggesting PG-13 instead.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, as my child ages, we'll see, because
Mm-hmm.
she's already saying things like are ruined when she's 2 years old. You're like, what's ruined? Like, you're using the word ruined at 2? Good God. Like, are you Wednesday Adams? So maybe not 13, but I would say probably not 5, 6,
Yeah,
7,
yeah,
like
yeah.
maybe 7 plus. Like, I think there's Y7 on a lot of TV shows now, like the
Oh, okay.
fantasy violence, and maybe it's Y7. Like, I would say, you probably just want to be aware that there is depictions of violence for the purposes of humor.
Right.
And if you're not okay with that in a like Despicable Me, sense, or a lot of the DreamWorks type of stuff, because I find DreamWorks does that more than Pixar. Like, I know Pixar
Yes.
probably has some of it, but you just don't see a lot of like Woody jokingly trying to like knock Buzz into like something, or like hurting. There's not a lot of physical slapstick violence in DreamWorks that isn't either self-perpetuated, like a Mike Wazowski hurting himself accidentally, versus somebody hurting Mike Wazowski for humor,
Right.
the way DreamWorks does. I think DreamWorks has a lot more of that, like, sibling, like slap them on the back of the head. It's hilarious, Three Stooges as stuff, which
Yeah.
sometimes I think for little kids and sometimes for parents of little kids, can be a little bit difficult to sift out of what you want to watch.
And I think too, there's more peril in DreamWorks films. Not
Mm.
not 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 all of the Disney stuff are absent of any real kind of like stakes, but I feel like in a lot of ways, things like How to Train Your Dragon, like characters die. You can,
Mm.
if you fall off your dragon, you're not caught. That's not good. Like, there's real
Yeah.
stakes in certain places. Whereas I think in a lot of ways that might be jokingly referred to, like there might be like a slip and almost fall in a Disney film, but they don't ever really have a character fall to their death, sort of thing, very often. It does happen. I would say some of the older Disney films were actually a little bit less um, politically correct in that way. Like
Oh yeah.
they hit
Black
harder.
Cauldron. Whew.
Yeah, yeah, like they had real stakes, whereas I think sometimes they're a little bit softer. I'm really looking forward to that new one, Soul, coming out from Pixar and
Oh,
Disney.
that one. I was gonna say the trailer just dropped for, I think, Raya,
Oh
and the
yeah,
something dragon. That looks beautiful, and of course, they throw up Moana, and Frozen is attached to it, of course,
yeah,
and like I personally love just the world that it created for Moana, so I'm excited for this one as well. But
hmm
yeah, that one also looks very cool.
yeah. No,
Um,
I saw the teaser poster, but I didn't see the actual trailer. But it's nice to see that kind of stuff still going, And now that
mhm.
we have this venue for Disney Plus, as we mentioned last week on the show, there's going to be a lot more heading directly to Disney Plus, depending on whether theaters are open and all that kind of stuff. Um, just to throw my Halloween hat into the mesh with a warning, I watched The Predator. I think this was from 2019, 2018, 2018. Uh, don't. It is. It's a like they. It's written and presented like a comedy. It's like an
Oh
action.
no.
It's like a Rush Hour. Yeah,
Huh.
no, it's not. And but then they combine that with some pretty decent special effects. The predators are mostly CG. They're not actually people in suits. And it's got a kid in it for starters. There's a 10-year-old kid that ends up with predator gear, and then the predators are going to retrieve it. And so like this army sniper guy is the dad, and he has to go save his kid because the predators that he encountered are now after his kid because he mailed the gear that he stole off of a predator home because that was the best idea. um like just and
Oh
there's
boy.
all kind of just like inescapable, unexplainable bullshit. Like how did like there's like a plane crash scene, starship crash thing where like they are clearly traveling very quickly for several minutes, and yet someone on foot catches up with them 2 minutes later, and he's like, "What you are? How did you even get here?" Sort of stuff. And the
Yeah.
scientist, knows how to shoot a rifle. Like there's all this kind of stuff that just didn't make any sense. The only thing that was neat about it was some of the new culture and we'll say world building that they added to the predator species. The idea is that they were genetically enhancing themselves by hunting and killing the most formidable of species. And in the predator movies, they remove your head and your spine as like a trophy. That's kind of like when they kill
Yeah.
people. It was pretty gruesome. But the idea was that apparently they were taking spinal fluid and then studying the DNA and what made that particular human or that particular alien species such a good hunt, like what made them a good tough target, and then
Yeah.
folding that into their own technology and genetics. And ultimately what they end up with is this giant 11-foot predator that's in this movie. It's a neat idea wasted on a terrible film. And to make matters worse, they wrap it up with like a wholesome like epilogue, and you're just kind of like, no, like it's just like it just makes no sense whatsoever. um the characters are laughable and inappropriate, and it's written like a uh not a Larry David show, but it's got that kind of like the team, the crack team of army dudes that take on these predators because they're the only people that know they exist, are like they're destined for the loony bin. They're in a military psychiatric ward, and like so they're all off their rocker and saying the dumbest stuff, and it just doesn't land in any of the previous Predator. Even the Predator versus Alien movie was better than this. So
Yeah.
I would say stay far away, especially if you're a fan of the original Predator 1 and Predator 2 films. Then that's not what you get. It's not an action movie. It's an action comedy farce, and it's not does not fit with the genre. But speaking of action and speaking of bloody action, I've spent I don't remember when I started it. I guess it was last weekend. I started playing, no, last Friday. I started playing Borderlands 3 finally. You and I have talked about this a number of times on the show. in terms of getting into it. And
Talked,
yeah,
coerced,
coerced.
twisted behind
Yeah.
your back. Yeah, exactly.
And it's not like I didn't want to. I bought it on Steam on sale in the spring. I played Borderlands 1 and 2. I didn't finish 2, but it's not that I didn't like it. I just ended up with other things that were better to stream for me and other interests, and always thought I would come back to it. And then Borderlands 3 came out, and it's like, well, do I want to play Borderlands 2 or do I want to just jump into 3? And I just kind of said, like, I don't really care that much about the story in Borderlands 2. I think I'll just be able to jump into 3. 3 seemed to pick up with a pretty solid explanation of where things left off. So, but so far, I will say I really like it. I really enjoy it. It's one thing about this being the third installment. It feels good. The movement feels good. The shooting feels good. There's more guns than you know what to do with, which is it's honestly kind of a problem. Like I am
True.
constantly emptying my inventory, and I'm a bit of a completionist when I play these games. I do a lot of the side missions. I do look and pick up a lot of stuff, and it's part of like the old World of Warcraft mentality, where like even if you don't need that, you're still going to pick it up and sell it later because you're ultimately going to need cash. Then
Right.
it's
Yeah.
good because I'm sitting on like $16,000, which is nice because it means that if I see a very cool weapon in a vending machine or something like that, then I can just buy it. Even if I just
Yeah.
want to try it, I can totally afford to just give it a go for $600 or $1,000 or whatever. So,
Yep.
so that part's fun. The only criticism I had that felt different from the other Borderlands 3 right off the start, which I know you and I have texted about, was the over the top cartoony violence of everybody exploding. And I don't mind it. It doesn't gross me out. I actually find it hilarious when it happens, but it was happening with 90% of the people that I killed, to the point where it would make no sense. Like I would shoot somebody in the kneecap with a handgun and their head would explode. I was like, this doesn't feel as fun or as special when it happens all the time. So I've experimented on the last couple of streams where I've gone into the gore settings in the options and I've turned them. I thought I was going to have some settings options, but it was like basically on or off. But even off, you still get blood spurt when you shoot somebody, and if you shoot them in the head or if you get like that super high um, critical hit, you'll still have things explode. Like you'll still
Yeah.
have a body do things. If you have like a cryogenic, critical hit, somebody will explode into like pieces, kind of like Terminator 2. Like they're frozen and bits of them go everywhere. And so like
Yep.
that kind of stuff, it's still rewarding. It still feels pretty good, but I've noticed that it does kind of cut off some of the more interesting story beats where I did like a side mission where I had to get some blood and plasma and stuff for a medic. And then in helping him take his own blood, I'm assuming that I cut his arm off by accident,
Yes, you
because
did.
he asks and talks like I cut his arm off by accident. But because I had the gore settings off, his arm was still attached in the animation
Oh,
and just bleeding a
yes.
lot. And so like they just kind of like they slapped on this patch of like you can turn the gore off, and they really didn't give an option for people to be able to enjoy the other aspects of the game. Like I kind of feel like they should have had like a middle ground where like it's off, it's medium, or it's on. And I kind of feel like they
Hmm.
should have some sort of medium. But it doesn't really affect the fun of the gameplay. I'm a sniper at heart when I play these games, and so I'm not close enough to really see a lot of the blood and guts anyway. Half the time I'm shooting from, across a block or an intersection or something. So I've been having a lot of fun with that. I'm playing as Zane, which was a suggestion that you made.
Hmm.
I was looking at Flack because I normally just like to be the big characters. He looked like a hunter. I thought that would be good for sniping. Of course, I realized in Borderlands that it doesn't really matter what you do. You can use whatever weapon you want. It's not like you have to be a sniper. If you want to just run around with machine guns, you can totally just do that.
This one in particular, they did a pretty solid job. I think people who are hardcore of the game would probably say, well, if Joel's a sniper, Brockett should have steered him towards flag. But just as a quick point of clarity, I also think what Zane brings from his verbal outbursts to the world is
Yes.
quite enjoyable. And I like Flack, but I think Zane's just I think a lot of people and fans of the game will say Zane kind of like takes the cake as far as like the quips. And then on top of that, I also figured some of the duality of his ability to use two skills at once rather than just one, and just having a random pet kind of follow you around as Flack is kind of I thought based on what we had discussed might be more in your wheelhouse. And Zane's not a bad sniper by any means, but yes,
No.
I think traditionally you would argue that Flack is the sniper character. But to your point as well, the game I believe does a very good job of nearly any of the four being excellent at sniping.
Yeah, and I think that one of the benefits of Zane's abilities being the Sentinel drone that he can send out, which is the first ability that you get, really helps in early game because as a sniper in Borderlands 3, early game sniper rifles suck. It does not
Yeah.
feel like a sniper rifle when you got to still shoot the guy 6 times in order to kill him. And
Hmm.
so having the drone go out for these bigger enemies and help kind of like noodle them down and shoot them from behind, and they're focused on you, but this thing gets around their shield, and so like I did find it very handy. I've since I'd missed my grenades, but I've since added the what's it called, the digiclone, so
Yeah.
he can double himself, and that helps with boss fights and fights where there's a heavy that you need to distract and things like that. And I've got a couple of augments to my skills where like if I activate both of those abilities at once, then I get extra gun damage, and I can like the three of us can really nail down a baddie pretty fast, which is
Oh,
pretty fun.
sure. Yeah.
I
Hmm.
was tempted by Frack, like I said, but I was also tempted by
Oh, I'm
Maz.
sorry. Flack. It's Flack. I messed it up too.
Is it Flack?
Yes, it's if FL the number 4 and then K,
Oh, okay.
just like 0 from 2 is
Right.
ZER and then the number
Number
0.
0, right.
It's this robot thing they
Right.
do, but
But Maz was the other character I was thinking about. But ultimately, as much as I like that kind of stuff, like getting into a mech and doing that kind of thing, I feel like it's better for like third person games now that not first person. And so I decided to go with Zane. And like you said, I'm enjoying the quips. I can't remember any of them right now, but we have had some pretty good laughs on stream when he kills somebody, and the timing of his little quip is just epic. Um, and really, the voiceover in Borderlands 3, it's just hilarious and inappropriate. And like if you've got underage people in the house, it's definitely a headphone situation.
yeah.
Because
They do
there's
not drop F-bombs. That's the one
they
thing, but the
don't.
gore and the suggestive language
Yeah.
and how they use language is very not okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, like I did this side quest for Moxie yesterday on stream, and Moxie's
Oh
from
boy.
the other games, and she's basically like a whorehouse barmaid,
She's
futuristic.
already not safe for
Yeah,
work. Like
yeah.
just
Oh,
the way
yeah,
they
yeah,
build her.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. She's and the way that she talks, but she's like, she makes all of these short dick jokes about this guy Kilowatt that you have to go
Hmm.
kill, who's her like ex lover sort of thing. She calls him Kenneth, which is very funny. But she's everything she says about him is basically like inadequate, compensation for overcompensating for things, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And at the very end, she's like, you should shoot him somewhere that's I can't remember exactly how she put it, like, but then she goes like, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And then a few seconds later, before the voiceover ends, she means shoot him in the dick. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So,
No, she
and so
doubled
all of us are
down.
just like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, okay, I was there, but thanks for the clarification. Like, so it's stuff like that that I find very funny and very amusing. I will say that some of the lesser bad guys, like some of the side quest people that you'll have on like a radio chatter, they've done too much radio distortion, and I can't understand what they're saying half the time.
Oh, that's
And
weird.
it sucks, yeah. So because I know it's funny, because like these bosses are these mini bosses that you fight, these two dudes that you have to kill because they've kidnapped somebody or whatever, and they're arguing about something over the radio. Like they're the dumbest sons of bitches on the planet. Like the stuff that they
Yeah.
say, I know it's funny, but I can't make it out, which is unfortunate. But any of the main story missions, anybody that has like a photo of them that comes up when you hear the voice, those voiceovers are fantastic. I really enjoy. Is it Lorelei? She's the Atlas contact that I've made contact with. I should let people
Yes.
know that I'm not done the game yet. I'm currently in chapter 7, so I've connected with Zero from Borderlands 2, which is the character that I played actually. Um, I've
Fan
beat
favorite. He's a big
yeah,
favorite. Yeah.
I beat Gigamind. And I didn't realize, I don't know if I saw this in Borderlands 2, but I like how Zero communicates in Borderlands 3. His face mask projects like a hologram of like smiley faces and emojis,
Emoji. Yeah.
and it's
He did that
really
a bit
funny.
in 2, but they embraced it really hard in Tales from Borderlands and so on and so forth. And I think just as since the technology is there and he's now an NPC versus a player character, they're able to sort of just really jump that up a bit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
No, so and he's really fun, and his dialogue is also really cool because he sounds very robotic, but then he says really fun stuff that you don't. He says emotional things at the end that you don't expect him to say. Yeah, so it's like, so this is a blah 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 blade, and it has this kind of thing, blah blah blah. Translation: it's a cool sword. It's
yeah.
like,
Cool sword.
cool
Yeah,
sword.
yeah.
Like I'm happy about this. Like stuff like that is really it was really cool. Some of the other characters I find like some of the I find it so strange that this stage in video games they still can't figure out how to lip sync a character. Like
Yeah, sure, yeah.
you've got the dialogue happening from a very talented voice actor, and then the Muppet in front of you, its mouth is even moving when the voiceover isn't happening. I'm just like, come on, guys, like
Yeah.
just get it together. So that kind of stuff is a little bit bothersome. But I comment almost endlessly about the set dressing in this game. Like there is so much stuff and so much detail between the boxes and the lockers and the alleys and the garbage bins and the posters on the wall, and then like the you look at this poster and then you realize it's a hologram poster and then it flickers because you're in a war-torn part of the city, and like it's really cool. And it felt very samey at first when I was on Pandora, and then
Exactly.
you quickly get through those missions, and Lilith loses her powers to the Psycho Twins, and that part was
Calypso, yeah.
okay because the only reason that she was alive is because the script said she was going to be alive. Don't I mean if it comes back later then sure, but like right now it was dumb. I was kind of I actually have expected them to kill Lilith. But then you go off world, and then when you get to, it's not Pandora again, it's
You get to the Metroplex on
Promethea.
Promethea.
So
Yeah.
I'm on Promethea, and I'm at the Meridian Metroplex, and then it feels like an entirely different game, and
Absolutely.
I get Mass Effect vibes big time. In a
Mhm.
very good way, in that it doesn't feel like it's copying it. It just feels metropolitan. Like it just feels like you're no longer a cowboy in this outback. I'm no longer shooting skags, thank God. It's just it's
It reminds you that this is supposed to be in a sci-fi far future, whereas Borderlands,
yes,
the first two games, even though it's quote unquote in a sci-fi world, it feels so much like more Western than it feels
it
at
does.
times. And I think Borderlands 3 embraces, and you'll see even more. I feel like Borderlands 3, especially as a sci-fi fan, you're going to find much more rewarding
Yeah.
overall.
Oh, it was basically prepping my brain for Cyberpunk 2077. Like
Yeah,
yeah,
sure.
there's a lot of neon and a lot of really cool stuff going on. Even the guns have more neon things, and your ammo count is like a projection coming out the side of the gun. It's not actually like there's part of it's in the UI, but in some weapons there'll actually be like a readout on the screen, which is just really
Hmm.
cool. And I find that a lot of the guns are very different now. Like I'm more of a Hyperion and a Dahl gun user. I find the other ones I don't really
Hmm.
gravitate to. I like having a scope even on handguns, and I also just like the grittiness of Dahl stuff. But
Yeah.
for things like sniper rifles and shotguns, the Hyperion stuff just looks so cool. And like when you zoom in with a Hyperion sniper rifle, you feel like you're playing a sci-fi game. You don't feel like you're just looking down a round scope of
Right.
a
Yep.
normal gun, right?
Yep.
And they often make fun noises, like there's some mechanical whirring, or reloading them is always this weird kind of like it opens up like a flower kind of animation, and like there's all this really cool stuff. So I'm enjoying the guns. I get a little bit overwhelmed with just how much stuff I have to carry around, and um, I one thing I do like about the game in that it doesn't punish you for not taking the most powerful weapon. So even though I might have a sniper rifle that does 108 damage, if I prefer the one that does 70, I'm going to use the one that does 70, and it has enough of a balance in that it probably shoots more often, or it's more accurate,
Hmm.
or it's easier to aim, or whatever it happens to be. And so you can still choose the weapons that are more fun than the weapon
Yeah.
that has to be min-maxed, you know?
Yeah. Agree.
I'm not finding that the boss drops are anything I can use. Like it's like, oh, here's a really cool handgun, and that's not even as good as the handgun that's in your hand. It's like, well, why is this coming from the boss? I kind of wish that there
Yeah.
was a mechanic where the game knew what you were holding, and then whatever the big boss dropped would be better than something in your hand, so that you get a new shotgun or a new rifle or something that would be an improvement. Whereas most of the time it's like, well, it's neat looking, but like it does half the damage of the thing that I have now, so I'm not going to use it. Um,
Yeah, there's a certain level of overpowered that still when they try and balance things doesn't carry. Like some side quests you get will never scale. Like they'll still say they're trivial to you now because you're 5 levels higher than the recommended level. But
mhm.
the one of the things that biggest complaints I've seen as a fan of the series and people I've seen other fans, they say like in Borderlands 1 and 2, a blue or a purple level gun. So the tiers of guns: white's common, green's uncommon, blue is rare, purple is basically ultra rare, and then you would go to gold slash yellow slash orangish, which would be legendary. And then there's other tiers from other games, but that's your base, right? And in the older games, blue and purple with red text in there usually is a
Right.
quote, and it'll be a good joke and a reference to the name of the gun or what it can do. All those things would usually still be pretty good guns. Like blue and purple level red text guns would still have a unique effect and would be very usable. But the one of the complaints they have from this game is blue and purple guns with red text generally, other than them being unique and dropping from certain bosses, a few of them are what they call like Uber level, where later in the game where you can kind of do a playthrough plus, you want to regrind to get the best and highest level version of that gun. But a vast majority of them still do have a lot of just get basically wiped out immediately by just a generic green gun at, 15, 20 minutes later. So the focus with this game, it seems to be they had a lot more focus on making the legendaries both more plentiful but also more impactful. And ironically, one of the guys you mentioned killing, like Kilovolt, he is notorious because he drops a very very good, very popular legendary assault rifle called the Monarch. And over the course of this game, which has been out for a year, they've tweaked his drop rates for that gun because at one point it was very low, at one point it was very high. And it's sort of all over the place, but it's an incredibly powerful gun. So what's ironic is his dedicated drop, the little blue one you got, which kind of I think does like neon darts or so. I don't know what I can't remember. Again, it's forgettable. His other things, these famous legendary weapons that are tied to him uniquely, um, that aren't themed like him but are tied to him, if that makes sense, hit his drop weight for the Monarch. So he has a very very popular and very useful gun. It's just not the quote unquote mission reward kilovolt gun, which to some people I can definitely understand is very frustrating. But at the same time, the balance being, if you know you can always get this gun by killing him and doing that mission, then there are those weapons in the game. But if you make all those weapons like that, then it almost makes the farming element of the game, which is a big part of their post game, less quote unquote desirable, because you're just farming a mission over and over again rather than going after a boss again. But
Right. Well, I have
it's
zero desire to fight Kilovolt again because that I did not enjoy the fight. I found that, I mean, it took me at least 4 to 5 tries. People can go back and watch the entirety of it
he's hard. Yeah.
yesterday on stream. I think that the first mechanic is that the floor has all these different electrical plates on it, and there is a system of like they turn yellow before they turn blue. The blue ones electrocute you, and you have to avoid them. And I think the problem therein is that it's a first person shooter where I can't always look directly down. And so I
Yeah.
can't see what I'm standing on half the time. And so
Yeah.
I found that mechanic was not great. I got used to it and I got better at it. I obviously did eventually beat him. And a lot of it was like using the run and the dash and slide attack. So like
Yeah.
if you run and hit and duck, then you'll slide, which is actually I think the fastest you can move. So I was able to
Yeah,
avoid some of the
basically, yeah.
attacks that way. I had a number of times where he basically one-shotted me from full shields and full health to 9%, at which point I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And that
Yeah.
just, I mean, I don't mind tough bosses, but I don't like it when there's like this one-hit wonder where you're like, well, what could I do against that? Like, I didn't find that at all fun. Um,
There's Yeah, he's I will say when I played the game the very first time, I tried to go beat him just as my side quest, and then I found that the boss, even though the mission level said I was good, the boss itself felt like he was like 5 levels higher than me, so I chickened out for a while and then came back and beat him. The tricky part about him and some of the other bosses in the game is because some of them are farmable, like, he's a big farm. There are certain mechanics that when you first fight these bosses, you're kinda, like, scratching your head like, "What?" And then later you find out, like, there are shields that give you shock immunity. So you walk into his arena, and his floor doesn't do jack. In fact, it
Right.
just recharges your shields. So you just walk in there, and all you have to do is focus on trying to kill him and not get hit by any projectiles he shoots or does that sort of stuff. So there are mechanics that while it's you shouldn't need an immunity shield to fight him, there are also mechanics that later on in the game, I think it's strange because it's almost like you can kind of be like, oh well, because he pissed me off, I'm really going to enjoy going back and fighting Kilovault immune to electric now, and basically I just give him the bird every time like it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like the satisfaction in the far future, whereas the frustration up front can sometimes be meted out or balanced out by later on. But to be fair, I've always had this problem with Borderlands. Flying enemies, I don't know how you snipe them because I'm not a good sniper. But first and foremost, like when it comes to something flying, I'm not terrible, but I just spray the air because I can't effing shoot these sons of bitches.
Yeah.
And so I find flying bosses in every Borderlands to be some of the most tedious and frustrating fights ever. Whereas I know several people probably enjoy them more, but I think a lot of it too sometimes is style. But I agree. I think the Kilovolt fight is one of the early ones that they kind of throw a side quest on. The entire area is side quest, by the way. Electricity is never important to
No, I
to
get
the
that. And
series,
actually,
but
in Electricity, that was a cool mechanic of like you just can't go fight the boss. You have to go get these tokens in his
mhm.
like television reality fight show that he's emceeing the whole time, which is very funny, right? Because he keeps on making passes at you,
Yeah.
so then you're fighting all these. I didn't find the bosses, the little mini bosses that you have to get the tokens from that difficult. It was you had to keep your head on a swivel. Like you couldn't just waltz in
The
there, but
mobs are tough, yeah.
yeah, but I didn't find it too bad. I died a couple of times because I got caught on geometry, like where I'd be caught up against a railing or like I couldn't move or
Yeah.
couldn't get down. And then the incredibly strong melee characters that come at you, the psychos, and if you don't
Yeah.
kill them before they get to you, then you're really quickly taken down. And I couldn't really do much because I couldn't move and jump away. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
the stuff like that I found it was interesting. I'm still only 3 slots, so I only ever have like a machine gun, a submachine gun, and either a sniper rifle or a shotgun. So if I've got the sniper rifle, then I just don't really have much for up close combat. Like I don't have anything that's a lot easier to quick load.
Um
Because handguns
yeah.
will load really quickly, but when you reload a machine gun, sometimes it takes us a while. I find for flying enemies, and now this, I don't remember any boss fights that I can recall here on the podcast, but flying enemies, the bugs that were on Pandora at first.
Mhm.
I find the best way to take them out, if you can get one, is a machine gun, not a submachine gun, but a machine gun that has an alt fire mode for single shot, because it's a really powerful um, bullet,
Yeah.
but it also has a very rapid fire and a big mag, and so I find I was able to take those guys out much better. I actually have a decent machine gun right now. I don't remember what it's called, but you flip your switch. And is this new in Borderlands 3? I don't remember alt
Yes.
modes in.
Alt firing is
Yeah, it's
new, and
fun.
each gun, well, I would say the brands they leaned into each brand being very unique, look and feel. The
Hmm.
alt modes for each brand are different because Malawan, as you've come into contact
Yeah.
with, has 2 alt modes where they're both an element of some sort.
Yep.
And then, Doll will usually have many guns or have a sub or a semi or an auto fire mode too, and a lot of them do that. And I think each gun maker is unique. They look different. They feel different. The shotguns have a kick and feel like a real shotgun. The pellets are very interesting. Yeah. So the guns themselves, they really went hard on making sure that people like the leveling, they like the building of their character with the skills, they like the guns. They like the dumb humor to the most part. I mean, I know a ton of people who still be like, the humor's so annoying, I can't play the game. It's like, well, I'm sorry, but that's the game. Like, it's like
Yeah.
you didn't
Oh
want to
yeah.
play friggin', you didn't want to play Baldur's Gate and have all this D&D talk. It's like, well, they don't play a Baldur's Gate. Yeah, like, I
Yeah.
don't understand. Like, that's part of the mythos almost at this point. But
I
anyway,
love the
yeah.
characters. I mean, like, I can't remember her name. She's the girl that gives you the vehicles at first. Callie, maybe, something like that. Ellie, Ellie,
Oh, Ellie,
Ellie.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So
Scooter's
she's
sister,
Scooter's
Moxie's
sister.
daughter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like she's funny. She like I
She has a
really.
lot of inappropriate jokes.
Oh yeah,
She calls you some cute things, and
yeah.
your cheeks will blush. You'll
Yo,
be like,
yeah.
"Well, Ellie, behave yourself."
Yeah, oh yeah, no, that's
Um,
it's really really funny because she mentions like I mean she's a big woman, and she makes a comment about like hey, eyes up here, soldier, or something like that. And she's like, I know you're looking at these hams or something like that. It's
yeah,
just really funny stuff. But like it's those kind of jokes that are not. I mean they're not appropriate, but they're not vulgar either. They're just kind of made in good humor. Whereas I
yeah,
found that the kilowatt stuff was like it felt like kind of like a Seth Rogen joke,
yeah.
whereas the stuff with Ellie and even some of the Lilith things that she says can be a little bit like tongue in cheek. She's more flirty in a good way, not in like an inappropriate way. Um, but I like the voice acting for Zane. I really like the feeling of the game. Now, I don't think this is a spoiler, so tell me if you can. But I was looking at some of the different key commands when I'm looking in my inventory, and you can actually bring up a gun and get like a really big close up of it, and you can even inspect parts of it, and it looks like you could eventually like change the parts of a gun, like change the sight or change the handle or the magazine loader or something.
So, from my understanding at this point, and I have not, so there's big news in the Borderlands world that they're going to come out with a totally new game mode for the game. Because right now it's basically you play through the main storyline, and then you replay through the storyline, or you play DLCs, or you play like basically raid bosses or sort of raid areas and that sort of stuff. And then apparently there's a new game mode called Arms Race, which is coming out, which everyone assumes is going to be tied very heavily to the amount of guns or which guns or whatever. To this point, and to my knowledge, you cannot change or manipulate parts on any gun you get. The interesting part of what they let you do is, because there's so many bazillion games, what's interesting is when you zoom in, you can see how if it's a Malawan scope, let's say, it gives you this passive ability. So you'll see certain guns that have this weird, like gooey alien like barrel sometimes that looks kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because of a certain gun piece has been put into it, and how it drops. So you can't so really no spoilers, you won't, and to my knowledge in this point of the game,
Right.
you can't really take pieces in and out, but you can change the skins of them, and you can yeah, you can pretty much change the skins of them. That's
Okay,
pretty much the
cool.
gist of it.
I mean, I'm gonna the next time I do a stream, we're gonna go forward. I had the opportunity at the end of the last stream to go to the next mission, but because it was a story mission, I thought, well, I'll just wait. We'll listen to the dialogue and we'll do the next stream with Lilith, and I have to go back up to the Sanctuary 3 and then go from there. I think we're actually going to a different planet. I don't remember what it's called. Athena, I think. Yeah.
Athenas, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like Athena with an S, but I think they pronounce it like Athenas. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that because again, it's gonna be another planet. So it's already feeling like you said, very more sci-fi epic.
I think you're gonna like this new planet.
Yeah,
It again feels very different from the other two.
cool.
And
So
so
yeah, I'm looking forward. I'm having a lot of fun with it. I'm glad I switched. I needed something a little bit more fast paced. I'm as much as I enjoy Minecraft and No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky has got some hard sci-fi vibes, obviously, but it's pretty slow. And I also I need to beat a boss in Minecraft Dungeons because Minecraft Dungeons was the other kind of like beat 'em up, flashy kind of fun thing that I was doing on stream. But I needed to I needed to get away from Minecraft-esque stuff for a little bit, just kind of give myself a break. Well, that brings us into the Internet Minute, which is, of course, brought to you by you. The Citadel Cafe is 100% listener-supported. If you're getting value out of the show, please consider putting a little bit of value back in. You can become a member at patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe. Joining at any level will get you an invite to the member-only Discord server. There are multiple levels with different rewards like Discord roles and bonus episodes. Actually, during the pandemic, I've opened up the bonus episodes to anybody that is a member. So it doesn't matter what level you're at, then you'll get access to that bonus episode. Starts at $1 per show, which is $4 a month, less than a latte at Starbucks. So if you like the podcast, you want to keep us on the air, then consider becoming a member at patreon.com/The Citadel Cafe. We are currently at 21 patrons. That's up 1 from last week. I normally set the goal to try to find at least one more patron per month than the month before. We were at 22 in September, which means we still need 2 more people to come on board for October to meet that goal. So if you're interested and if you'd like to help with the podcast, that's patreon.com/The Citadel Cafe. And I have some good news coming out of the good old USA this week. The U.S. spacecraft OSIRIS-REx touches asteroid Bennu to grab samples. This is from cbc.ca. I caught this in my morning newsletter. I knew what was happening anyway because I follow NASA on YouTube and stuff, but confirmation from the OSIRIS-REx spacecraft as it made contact with the surface of the asteroid Bennu more than 320 million kilometers away, but it could be a week before scientists know how much, if much of anything, was grabbed and whether another try will be needed. If successful, OSIRIS-REx will return the samples in 2023. I thought this was just bananas cool. I knew of the mission. I heard about it on Twitter. I heard about it on some of my tech podcasts. But watching some of the how it works videos and checking out this article was just really, really cool. Getting the stats on like how far away it is, how difficult it is to actually, because you can't actually land the spacecraft on the asteroid. The gravity is too low. It won't stay. And so essentially the spacecraft had to touch the asteroid, kind of like bounce on it. And on the moment of contact, it did this thing where it blows out a bunch of, I guess, air. I'm not exactly sure how the mechanics work, that kick up a bunch of particles from the asteroid, off of the asteroid. And then the spacecraft would then suck those particles into its collection system for later analysis back on the planet. But because there's no air in space, you can't just vacuum it up. Like you have to kind of like get it moving first and then suck it in. Yeah. Like it was just really interesting idea. And what I didn't realize is that that's how dogs smell. When a dog sniffs, it will blow out first to kick up a bunch of particles off the ground, and then it'll sniff in to find out like, well, what are these things? What am I smelling? And I was like, okay, I didn't know that about dogs.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Which kind of explains like the huffy way that dogs kind of pant and sniff around.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So yeah, it was pretty good. So anyway, it was a really neat article on space, I guess, exploration and science, and just the fact that it's 320 million kilometers away just kind of boggles the mind. And then my second pick, which is going to be very, very short, something I had no idea about until I saw a retweet from Peter McCann on Twitter, and that is the Great Green Wall, or the Great Green Wall of the Sahara and the Sahel, which is the green belt that over 20 countries, I think, are working together to create in Africa. It is a wall of trees, and I mean it's not a thin wall. It's a very large wall of trees that more than 20 African countries have joined together to plant, and it will go across the continent, east to west, to help stop the spread of the Sahara Desert as the Sahara travels south. The Great Green Wall of Africa will stretch 7,000 kilometers from coast to coast, right across the whole continent. But essentially, it's just kind of to help with climate changes on the continent, and the fact that more than 20 African countries are joining together to do it is just good news in the world of green science and green progress. And I thought it was worth sharing. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Citadel Cafe. You can get more information about the show and links to some of the things that Brockett and I talked about at thecitadelcafe.com. Music for the show was composed by Kevin MacLeod, and you can email the show at thecitadelcafe@gmail.com or find the show by name on Twitter. Subscribe for free on iTunes, Android, Stitcher, Spotify, and now Amazon Music. If you want to share the podcast with your friends, word of mouth is the easiest way to support the show. Just tell a friend about the Citadel Cafe and where they can go to listen to it. My name is Joel Duggan. You can find everything that I am doing online at joelduggan.com. That will include links to the Spawn Chunks, a podcast all about Minecraft that I do every Monday with my friend Johnny. And you can also follow me on social media at Joel Duggan and, of course, at twitch.tv/Joel Duggan, where we will continue to play Borderlands 3. Brockett, where can people find you online?
Just watching Joel play Borderlands 3. You can follow me at the Cat Volver, like a cat revolver. And you can also check out the hashtag Candy of This Day.
You've been listening to the Citadel Cafe, where we are fast, easy, and cheap, but you can only pick two.